what is a bond? A bond is a piece of paper from a surety that says, I guarantee payment. And so on public projects, there's two different types of bonds and that the general contractor has to get to provide to the owner, the governmental entity. The first is a performance bond, which is for the full amount of the contract. So say a general contractor was hired to build a fire station, it's going to cost $4 million. So the general contractor has to go to a surety and get a bond for $4 million, and it's called a performance bond. And it says, hey, governmental entity, I will perform this work, and if I don't, you can file on my bond of $4 million to have the project finish, right? And so he gets a bond, and if he fails to finish or that he gets fired, the governmental entity can file on his bond and pay for the work to be finished, right? And then the bond company will sue the GC, and it's a big whole mess. Hey guys, it's Karalynn. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to talk about public projects. So I always get the question, can you file a lien on a public project? Meaning, how do you secure your right when you're owed money on public projects? So let's first talk about what public projects are. So you're talking any state or federally owned project, right? From hospitals to airports to libraries to fire stations, anything that's owned to, road work, anything that's owned by a governmental entity, you cannot file a lien on. All right. And that premise comes from the basic rule is that governments, whether state or federal, have what's called sovereign immunity, meaning they are immune from being sued or any kind of prosecution against them unless they give you permission to. So, which means you can't file a lien on public projects because that's initiating a suit basically against a public entity. And so what the legislature has done at both the state and federal level, is to require bonds. Okay, and so what is a bond? A bond is a piece of paper from a surety that says, I guarantee payment. And so on public projects, there's two different types of bonds and that the general contractor has to get to provide to the owner, the governmental entity. The first is a performance bond, which is for the full amount of the contract. So say a general contractor was hired to build a fire station, it's going to cost $4 million. So the general contractor has to go to a surety and get a bond for $4 million, and it's called a performance bond. And it says, hey, governmental entity, I will perform this work, and if I don't, you can file on my bond of $4 million to have the project finish, right? And so he gets a bond, and if he fails to finish or that he gets fired, the governmental entity can file on his bond and pay for the work to be finished, right? And then the bond company will sue the GC, and it's a big whole mess. But the other type of bond that they're required to get is what's called a payment bond. Again, for the full contract amount, in the example for $4 million. And this provides that everybody that works on the project will get paid.
Not getting paid on a job you already completed? Well, that's where we come in. At the Karalynn Law Firm, our lien and collection department helps you get paid fast and the right way. You did the work, you deserve to get paid. We help you take the right legal steps by filing liens and collecting the money that's owed. Contact us at 713-715-7334, or you can visit our website at www.thekrominslawfirm.com.
And if they don't get paid, they don't file a lien, they file a claim on that bond, right? And so the federal act is called the Miller Act. This is what the law is called that allows you to file a federal bond claim, right? And so then every state has what's called Little Miller Acts, which is basically the same thing, just at the state level, right? And so they have to get these bonds, performance bonds and payments bonds. And it protects everybody who provides labor or material on the job. So what do you have to do if you're working on a public job and you're not paid, right? In most states, they still require you send notice to the general contractor the 15th day of the second month after you remain unpaid. That's basically a notice before your bond claim that goes out that says, hey, I'm owed money. If I'm not paid, I'm going to move forward with a official bond claim, right? If you don't get paid after that notice, then you file the official bond claim notice, which is a sworn statement sent to the surety referencing the bond, then the bond number, specifically describing who you were hired by, the work that you did, and how much that you're owed, and the time period for that you're owed money. So you send certified mail or other way that you can trace that it was sent. And then what happens is the bond company will get your claim, they'll review it, and they'll either pay it or deny it. And generally, first off the bat, they're going to deny it, because what happens is the general contractor is going to step in and respond and say that we're not going to pay you. Is usually how it happens. But you're still protected in the same way that you have a lien if you filed that bond claim. If you sent that sworn statement in a timely manner, which is the 15th day, the third month from the first time you're owed material. And bond claims, you can go until 90 days after last work. So you got some time. But one of the most particular things is getting a copy of the bond. Now, on federal bonds, they have an office where you can call and get a copy of it. It's a little easier on that. On state bonds, most states don't require the bond to be recorded anywhere or be anywhere of public record, which means the only way you can get it, there's two ways, is ask the general contractor to give you the bond, which is their bond. And if you file a claim, they're not going to be happy about it. So sometimes hard to get. You can also do a public information request to the governmental entity, which can take up to 30 days. So best practices on bond claims, especially if you're working directly for the general contractor, is to get a copy of the general contractor's bond when you sign the contract or before you start work. Generally in that situation, if you're a sub, you're going to be required to get your own bond, so that the general contractor can file on your bond. So you want equal authority to, if the GC hasn't paid you, you want to file on their bond. So making sure you get a copy of that early. So that's one of the tough things about bonds, is getting it early, because you can't wait to the last minute, because they don't have to send it to you. They should legally, but sometimes they don't. And there's no real penalty for them not sending it to you in a timely manner. All right. So you file your bond claim. It's denied. What's the next step? Well, you have to wait 60 days from when you file it, and then you can file a lawsuit to enforce the bond. If it's a federal job, you'll be in federal court. If it's a state job, you'll be in state court. And basically, it's very similar to a lien foreclosure. You got to prove you did the work, you're owed the money, and you filed the bond claim process properly. All that to be said is that when you work on a public job, although you don't have lien rights, you are secured if you take the time to send the notices and find out who the bond company is. I also have a very detailed article about this on my website at thekaralynslawfirm.com. There's a great blog that breaks this down step by step on how you need to do it. Obviously, the rules are a little different by state, but knowing that up front, especially if you're going to public works jobs for the first time, knowing these rights is huge. Also knowing that public works jobs are way slower to pay than private jobs generally, so making sure you have enough cash flow to handle that. All things important to know before you start any public works job. Hey guys, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on my website and sign up for our newsletter where we send out great informational stuff.